Cast your mind back to 2016. Leicester City shocked the world and beat 5,000 to 1 odds to win the Premier League. But did you know something very similar happened in Formula 1? Brawn GP completed a fairy tale story when they became world champions in what would be their only season in F1. And having spent years chasing glory, Jenson Button suddenly found himself lifting the Drivers' Championship. But how did it come about, and why was it such a big shock? Stay watching to find out. To start with, let's explain who some of the major players were. As you could probably guess, the Brawn team got its name from its owner, Ross Brawn, who by 2009 was already a legendary figure in the world of Formula 1. Brawn made his first foray into F1 in 1985 when he joined the hastily team as part of the design team. However, he became a success in 1991 when he moved to Benetton and struck up a friendship that would go on to shape the modern era of the sport. At Benetton, Brawn met Michael Schumacher, and together they won 2 consecutive Drivers' Championships, as well as the Constructors title in 1995. The relationship between the pair was so strong that when Schumacher accepted an offer to join Ferrari, he convinced Brawn to join him the following year. Working as the technical director for the famous Italian team, Brawn became known as the mastermind of Schumacher's success, as Ferrari enjoyed a period of dominance that would not be beaten until Mercedes' run in the 2010s. But slowly, as with any dynasty, results began to worsen, and in 2006, Ferrari announced that Brawn was to leave the team. And the next big question was, where was one of Formula 1's greatest minds going to go? The obvious answer was Red Bull, who had just joined the sport and were on a recruitment drive that saw the likes of Adrian Newey move to the Milton Keynes outfit. But their offer could not entice Brawn, and instead he became the team principal of Honda. And it was there that Brawn met a certain Jenson Button. From the outside, it seemed Button had the dream life. He lived in Monaco, he raced Formula 1, and he had his pick of glamorous girlfriends. But there was one thing always haunting him: success in the sport. On a 2006 episode of the BBC's Top Gear, Button said he would trade in the Monte Carlo lifestyle, the money and the cars for that single race win. And while that did eventually come to him that same year, it was his only victory in 9 seasons of trying. There was no doubt Button was a good driver, but following an 18th place finish with Honda in the 2008 season, his stock was the lowest it had ever been. That's why he opted to stay at the newly created Brawn team and agreed to a pay cut just to keep his spot on the grid. From the off, his championship chances looked grim, with bookies ranking him at a 100 to 1 outsider, which is currently the same odds Lando Norris has of winning in 2023. But little did Button know, his life was about to be turned upside down. So, those are the major players. Now, let's set the scene. For anyone who's seen The Big Short, they will know 2008 was a big year in the housing market, and the effects of the collapse were felt across the world, even in Formula 1. And while we do not have Margot Robbie in a bathtub to explain it, we'll do our best. With looming costs, including a $300 million budget to keep the Brackley site open, and with other areas, such as their road car manufacturing, that required more urgent attention, Honda opted to drop out of the sport, announcing the 2008 season would be their last in F1. This hit Brawn particularly hard, as despite Honda finishing 9th in the Constructors, he believed the 2009 car they had been working on was capable of winning races. Little did he know how right he was. Faced with an exit from the sport, Brawn stumped up the cash and purchased 100% of the Honda team, with Brawn himself having a 54% controlling stake. But the Brawn entry was by no means straightforward. It was not until March 2009 that the acquisition was complete, and they suddenly found themselves without an engine just weeks before the season was due to start. It seemed a fool's errand to continue their efforts, But such was Brawn's belief in the car, he kept pushing forwards. And here's why. Just as 2022 saw a massive shake-up in the sport's regulations, 2009 saw similar, with a particular focus on aerodynamics, in order to make overtaking easier. The rear wings had been widened and lowered down. Slick tyres were introduced for the first time, and the Kinetic Energy Recovery System, or KERS, was introduced. But crucially, an effort was made to reduce downforce, and so the team's mechanics began devising ways around this regulation. In his book, the former Brawn CEO Nick Fry said that the idea that would prove integral to Brawn's success was floated by Honda engineer Saneyuki Minagawa in an aerodynamics meeting, who, as a result of reading the regulations in his second language, interpreted the rules differently and suggested that there was scope to expand the size of the diffuser, which would allow the car to use its own chassis to push itself closer to the ground and create more downforce. The so-called double diffuser was fitted to the rear of the car, and following a speedy deal with Mercedes for an engine, Brawn headed to the pre-season testing as already a remarkable story for just being on the grid. But soon, eyes were widening, and not only at the presence of the Brawn car on the grid, but the sheer speed of it. Everyone was talking about it, and as with any technical oddity in F1, it was not long before protests were filed. An official protest was submitted at the first race in Australia, but the FIA deemed it legal, and in Melbourne, the team topped the timesheets in every practice session, securing pole position as well as the race win for Button. The hype was real, and the speed shown in the pre-season testing had translated into the race itself. It was not a flash in the pan either, and the wins kept on coming. Malaysia, Bahrain, Spain, Monaco, Turkey. Button would go on to win a record 6 of the opening 7 races. And by the time he arrived at his home Grand Prix at Silverstone, he had a 26-point lead in the standings over his teammate. The advantage caused by the double diffuser was incredible and began a development arms race within the sport. For at the same time as rival teams were protesting Brawn, their own mechanics and designers were working on an upgrade package to their car that would install their own double diffuser. Slowly, the rest of the teams caught up to Brawn, meaning the team no longer had the outright speed advantage of their rival competitors. Sebastian Vettel won at Silverstone, closing the gap between himself and second-place Barrichello to 2 points. Meanwhile, Button went on a run of P6, P5, P7, P7 before a retirement at Spa. By the end of the Belgian Grand Prix, the momentum was definitely with other teams. But both Brawn and Button were helped by the fact that there was not one clear contender for their crown. 6 different drivers from 4 constructors would win a race in the 2009 season, which meant that despite Button no longer even finishing on the podium, the points were being shared enough between his rivals to ensure he stayed on top of the standings. The tension grew with Button's run of results, but a 1-2 finish for Brawn at Monza pushed the team that little bit closer to the title. In the end, Button and Brawn's early season advantage proved too strong, and they secured a memorable championship win at the final race in Brazil. Button had done what he must have thought was impossible and became the 10th British world champion and the second in as many years following Lewis Hamilton's 2008 victory. Brawn became the only team ever to win the World Championship in its only season of competing, and the fairy tale was complete. In November, Mercedes owner Daimler announced that they had purchased a 75.1% stake in the Brawn team, and with the team rebranded at Mercedes for the 2010 season. Brawn would retain a 24.9% stake along with Nick Fry, and would stay on as team principal until 2013, when Toto Wolff arrived to begin Mercedes' dominance, while Button moved to McLaren. But the Brawn story has lived long in the memory of Formula One fans, for it serves as the perfect reminder of how just sometimes David can beat Goliath. The 2009 championship was a victory of engineering, And while the double diffuser was eventually banned in 2011, it has become synonymous with the remarkable achievements of Brawn's season. To this day, Mercedes operate out of the base where the BGP 001 was created, and while plenty of other championship-winning cars have been produced at Brackley, the Brawn car has rightfully earned its place in the Formula One Hall of Fame. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed learning about one of the biggest underdog stories in Formula One history. For more like this, be sure to check out our video on why countries are now so desperate to host an F1 race.